solo runs of Pokemon games are ridiculously easy. With enough levels, items in battle, and cheese, pretty much any Pokemon can beat any game. But what if you implemented hardcore Nuzlocke rules? Specifically, no overleveling past the next gym leader, no using items in battle, and most critically, no fainting. One shot, do or die. Suddenly, soloing an entire game with just one measly little pocket monster becomes significantly harder, and in most cases, downright impossible. So I wanted to find out whether legendary Pokemon, the best of the best, could win this challenge in Pokemon Emerald. Also, I'm counting Mythicals as legendaries. That means that there's 21 candidates, so after acquiring 21 unique, legitimate copies of Pokemon Emerald from my Uncle Jimtendo that each substitute the standard starter Trico, my quest to determine the strongest legendary or mythical begins. And our very first challenge is the fight against my rival May. But surely these ultra powerful monsters can defeat her duck without any... So, the first thing that makes this challenge deceptively difficult is that Gen 3 level up movesets are notoriously horrendous. This is even more so the case for legendaries and mythicals, since most of them are normally caught at higher levels and little care was put into optimizing their low level moveset. For example, Lugia and Ho-Oh don't learn an attacking move until level 22. But the worst victims of this are the Reggies, who only know explosion until level 9, and without a way to safely level them up, all three of their adventures are cut tragically short. So mere steps away from my hometown, I've witnessed a triple homicide, and our roster of potential champions drops to 18. Unfortunately, this is but the first of our early game woes. The second happens to lie just west of Oldale Town, youngster Calvin, the only non-storyline based mandatory trainer until after Slateport City. Calvin's on a bit of a solo adventure himself, sporting a single Dark-type Poochyena, which provides a problem for Mewtrudy, Celebilly, Lanatius, and Laritios, who all only know Psychic-type attacking moves until after the first level cap. Now, Celebilly can make do by using Leech Seed and Recover to stall his way to victory. For the others, though, I need to burn through their PP until they're forced into using Struggle, which, other than being kind of inconvenient, isn't much of an issue. By the way, this is also how Ho-Owen and Luigia are able to defeat May's Torchic. Fun fact, if you click Whirlwind in the fight against the Zigzagoon that's terrorizing Professor Birch, he just gets blown away and the battle ends. Which makes sense, but I've never seen that interaction before. Anyways, struggling Calvin's Poochyena to death is fine and dandy for Mewtrudy and Lanatius, but Laritios has a problem. See, in addition to Psywave, Laritios knows Memento, a move that lowers the attack and special attack of an enemy Pokemon at the expense of your Pokemon's own life. So without a way to burn Memento PP, Laritios can't struggle, and thus he cannot defeat Calvin's Poochyena. That means that 4 legendaries are dead, and we haven't even made it to Petalburg City. Once there, though, I have to meet up with my father and my half-rival, half-charity case Wally. With the holidays coming up, I'll need to get both of them a gift, and there's nothing better than the Essential Open Earbuds from the sponsor of this video, Raycon. I love using my Essential Open Earbuds every day. They're perfect for listening to music and podcasts on my morning walks with Poppies, since I can still hear what's going on around me, and with their multi-angular rotating ear hook, they fit securely and comfortably right outside my ear canal, which makes them perfect for when I'm running or just lounging around the house. The Essential Open Earbuds also come with a charging case that has 36 hours of battery life, so I basically charge them like once a week, if that. And with sound quality that's just as good as more expensive brands at half the price, the Essential Open Earbuds are the perfect go-to gift for anyone in your life, whether that's your father or your half-rival, half-charity case. Especially because right now Raycon audio products are up to 20% off this holiday season. Just click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/flagonopen to save on Raycon audio products like the Essential Open Earbuds site-wide. And be sure to order by December 15th to guarantee delivery by Christmas, because great gifts shouldn't show up late. Thanks so much to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to the challenge. Other than again riding the struggle bus to deal with the Aqua Admin's Poochyena, it's trivial for all 17 of my remaining legendaries and mythicals to make it to Rustboro City, though there we once again face an imposing threat, the very first gym leader Roxanne. This matchup is extremely type dependent. For the likes of Kyogre and Groudonald, it's trivial to sweep through all 3 of her rock types with super effective water pulses and mud shots respectively. Same goes for Suicune with Bubble Beam and Mewin with Bullet Seed, since he can learn every possible TM in the game. Mewtrudy, Ryanku, Celebilly, and Jimrachi can also all brute force their way through the fight, taking advantage of their high special attack and Roxanne's rock type's low special defense. Both Bentei and Rayquaza take super effective damage from Rock Tomb, but with natural respectable bulk as well as a special attacking move with a chance to flinch, they both manage to squeak by and earn easy dubs. In fact, Rayquaza doesn't even take a single tick of damage. The same, though, cannot be said about his cosmic rival Deinoxys, who in Emerald is forced into his speed form. In Gen 3, Deoxys forms are game dependent, which is something I didn't know until starting this challenge. For now, our best mode of offense with Deinoxys is Nightshade, which does damage equal to the level of the user, and even though I kinda forgot to bring Deinoxys to the level cap of 15, he still makes it through with 11 HP to spare. So that brings me to Lanateus. Like many of her Psychic-type peers, she does have a solid special attack stat that should make this trivial. The issue is that her attacking move of choice is Psywave, an extremely weird move that randomly does damage from 0.5 to 1.5 times the user's level. I recently heard it described as Nightshade for gamblers, which I love. I've never thought of it that way before. However, like with most gambling, the odds of Psywave are not in your favor, since it has a bafflingly low accuracy of 80, thus bringing your average damage down well below that of simply opting for the consistency of Nightshade or Seismic Toss. Psywave also only has 15 PP, so Lanateus has to beat all 3 of Roxanne's Pokemon before she runs out. And she gets off to a great start by missing twice in a row. Thankfully, our bulky queen knows Wish for consistent recovery, or else that would have been the end of her run right there. By carefully switching between using Wish and Psywave, we eventually take out Roxanne's 2 Geodudes, only missing 4 more times for a lovely 50% average accuracy. So that means that as Nosepass comes in, Lanateus has just 3 power points left. A disaster waiting to happen, since we obviously miss yet another Psywave, and we soon find ourselves PP-less as Nosepas's Oranberry activates and brings her back into the yellow. But 2 can play the berry game, buddy, and with a held Lepa Berry, I get 10 more PPs to play with, which is good, since Roxanne also uses her second and final potion. But from here, Lanateus goes on a legendary run, connecting with 3 Psywaves in a row. They said it couldn't be done, to safely win us the battle against the first gym leader. Of course, that does leave 5 legendary birds, and not a single one has what it takes to best Roxanne. A maelstrom of rocks cascade from the heavens, wiping out every single one of my feathered friends. Ho-Owen and Luigia can only deal minor damage via struggle, Mollytress fails to do enough damage with her resisted embers, Zapdos fares even worse with Peck as his only attacking move, and Arthur Kuno, even with Powder Snows to one-shot the 2 Geodudes, fails to survive the merciless onslaught from Nosepass. I mean, Arthur could actually win this with a well-timed freeze, and technically the others could also win if Rock Tomb proceeds to perpetually miss, but that's not the challenge we're playing here. We're not just gonna keep doing this over and over again until we get lucky. Here, it's one and done. So all 5 birds are officially finished, as now just a dozen legendaries and mythicals remain. So with the multiversal massacre of Rustboro City behind us, we're off to Dewford Town, where after I deliver Mr. Stone's letter to Steven 12 times, I have to square up against Brawly and his 3 fighting types. Naturally, our psychic types have the easiest time against his violently inclined toddlers, or rather, the psychic types that actually know a psychic type attack. So that's just Mewtrudy, Celebilly, and Jimrachi. Deinoxys, like against Roxanne, simply has to click Nightshade 12 times to win the battle without much of a problem. Mewin and Lanateus both have to rely on the same tech. Steven, after ignoring his father's letters like the righteous ungrateful bastard he is, gave me the TM for Steel Wing, a move that is pretty terrible, but in this instance is better than relying on Lanateus's inaccurate Psywaves or Mewin's pounds. Well, Lunatius actually mixes up her attacks depending on when Brawly opts to use Bulk Up, but in the end, the Psychic-type contingent, other than Luigia, RIP brother, remains fully intact as we collect our second badge in the various timelines. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Kyle Ogre, Groudonald, and Rayquaza are all simply far too powerful for Brawly to put up a legitimate fight. Kyle Ogre, in particular, is by far our strongest Pokemon, since his Drizzle ability gives a boost to his Stab Water Pulses that already hit quite hard coming off of a special attack stat of 150. Not a single one of Brawly's Pokemon survives a hit, even though I accidentally started the battle at level 16. But as we switch over to watching Groudonald sweep, notice how he doesn't gain XP when taking KOs? That's because Uncle Jimtendo added hard level caps into these special, but still very legitimate copies of Pokemon Emerald. Hard level caps mean that as soon as my Pokemon hits the current level cap, they'll stop gaining HP until the next level cap is unlocked. With just a single Pokemon, it'd be really easy to overlevel on the various mandatory trainers between each of the boss fights. I decided that a level cap would help speed up the more passive sections of the playthrough without changing the game too much. Anyways, both Suicune and Ryanku are also able to sweep their way through Brawly with their respective stab attacks. But Bente, he runs into a bit of a snag. Ember is enough to two-shot Machop, and with some luck, we can even cause Brawly to burn through his 2 super potions when Meditite is out, since he can't actually do any damage as long as you keep attacking when he uses Focus Punch. Bente's issue comes against Makuhita, because Brawly's strongest and heaviest toddler has the ability Thick Fat, effectively granting the Chubster a fire-type resistance that makes Bente's attacks do very little damage. At the same time, our foe can set up with Bulk Up and then start ripping boosted attacks. My hope was that an Ember would burn and drastically reduce our foe's damage output, but no dice. With a Citrus Berry bringing him back to nearly full HP, I knew that there was exactly one way to win this fight: going for flinches with Bite. And it works! Makuhita flinches! Though since Bente's just one hit away from death, we're gonna need a few more. Bite number 2 comes out, and it's another flinch. Bite number 3? That's flinch number 3, which means we need just one more flinch and Bente lives. Bite number 4 brings Makuhita into the red, and then Vital Throw takes the KO, ending Bente's run just an inch shy of the second gym badge. 12 legendaries and mythicals arrived in Dewford Town, but only 11 leave. And though we've already lost nearly half of our potential champions, our hardest early game challenge still awaits: Mauville City's Watson and his 4 electric types. This jolly gent is, in my opinion, the single hardest gym leader in the entire series. You know, assuming you don't have one of the 2 accessible ground types at this point in the game. He's got a lead Voltorb that can blow up, an Electrike that can cause paralysis via static, a Magneton that 1 is extremely difficult to take out, 2 can spread status with Supersonic and Thunder Wave, and 3 hits ridiculously hard with Shockwave off of 120 base special attack. And finally, he also has his speedy ace Manectric. Shockwaves mean you can't choose this fight with Double Team or Sand Attack. The various status conditions means that most fights are subject to volatile RNG, and a team of 4 Pokemon means that in a solo run, if my Pokemon doesn't get one-shots and doesn't have a healing move, they're at risk to just simply being chipped away to death. Watson makes a lot of Emerald Challenge runs effectively impossible, especially when the player has such limited resources, though there are a few. I mean, we can start with Groudonald, who doesn't need any assistance whatsoever. 4 mud shots are all it takes to win yet another easy battle. Like in the last gym fight, Mewin has to rely on a TM tech. This time it's Bulk Up, courtesy of Brawly. By boosting his attack and defense just a single stage, Mewin can one-shot Watson's lead Voltorb with a mildly inaccurate Mega Punch. That brings in Electrike, and since he loves to spam Howl, he's the best target for setting up the additional bulk ups we need to safely win this fight. 5 is enough, so Mewin eviscerates the pup, mercifully avoiding static as Magneton comes in third. Now, as frustrating as Magneton's status moves can be, it does mean that if Magneton is slower and does not see the kill, Watson will almost always go for Thunder Wave to gain the speed advantage before doing damage. This allows me to equip a Cherry Berry that essentially grants 2 free turns of damage. At +5 attack, Mewin can use Rock Smash, a pitiful 20 base power in this game, to ensure the 2-hit KO on the Steel type without taking any additional damage. So as Manectric comes in, all we have to do is hit a Mega Punch which surprisingly we actually do. That's 2 Pokemon through and 9 to go. Trudy adopts a very similar strategy to that of her parent, older sibling. I don't know. I'm sure the comments will clarify that. Bulk ups against the Yappy Pup means that Trudy should be able to win the rest of the fight, though I didn't actually teach her Rock Smash since I figured that her other moves might be more useful going forward. It's a little risky because it does mean that we do not get the 2-shot on Magneton, which means that we do get paralyzed before we can get the KO. But thanks to some solid luck, we still win with plenty of wiggle room left to spare. Our third and final bulk up user is Rayquaza, who really only needs it to deal with Magneton since they otherwise resist our powerful Dragon Claws. At first, I thought about getting the coin case and racking up enough cash to get the TM for Flamethrower, but even though this is technically possible, it's a pretty massive grind in a solo challenge, since if I didn't have the hard level caps on, I wouldn't actually be allowed to grind money from trainer battles without over leveling, and I also can't use pickup to sell infinite items. The only options then would be to farm infinite berries, which would take forever, or to gamble, which again is technically possible, but basically becomes a matter of time and luck instead of skill. So ultimately, I decided to just ban the Mauville City Game Corner until the late game, which doesn't really affect Rayquaza's run, though it does have a pretty significant impact on his fellow legendaries and Mythicals, who would really benefit from some stronger moves and coverage. Without the Game Corner though, Watson's Pokemon, and more specifically his Magneton, are simply too powerful for some of my would-be champs. Deanoxys is still stuck with Nightshade, so he doesn't even make it past Electrike. Pretty pathetic. Raikou's best bet is Bite, which does the job against both Voltorb and Electrike, but against Magneton, I decide to switch to Rock Smash and hope for some lucky defense drops. Even with a few though, our poor Saber-Tooth Tiger simply doesn't have enough juice to deal with Magneton's Thunder Waves, Supersonics, and Super Potions. Though he does ultimately get the KO, it's the last thing Raikou will ever do, because Manectric comes in and takes the kill just a few turns later. Despite a massive weakness to electric types, I was hoping that Suicune would be able to fare a bit better than his brethren by first setting up Rain Dance. And though it works to chain swift KOs on Voltorb, Electrike, and Magneton, it doesn't matter since Manectric outspeeds. And even a critical hit Bubble Beam isn't getting the OHKO unless I can set up another Rain Dance. So with that, the third and final legendary beast falls. If only Suicune could instantly set up rain that never went away. Oh hey Kyogre! With the permanent rain and a significantly higher special attack stat, Kyogre should be able to surmount his electric type weakness. Hell, a single water pulse almost fully OHKOs Magneton. So at full HP, we should be able to barely survive Manectric's shockwaves, but then he gets a critical hit, meaning that Kyogre is dead on the following turn. I believe the saying is an eye for an eye. Suck it, Manectric. That was both unlucky and then really, really lucky. Kyogre lives. That leaves Celebilly, Laniatius, and Jimrachi, all three of whom have access to reliable recovery. Celebilly has Leech Seed and Recover, whereas Laniatius and Jimrachi both have Wish, with the latter even having Rest to shake off paralysis. In fact, Celebilly and Laniatius also both know Safeguard, which they can use to prevent all status conditions, though in Celebilly's case, Voltorb manages to paralyze us with a Rogue Spark before I set it up. Regardless, Safeguard is a deceptively useful move for solo runs since it straight up avoids the potentially run-ending RNG that comes from paralysis in particular. Even with the goof in Celebilly's matchup, all three of the bulky psychic types make it through the fight against Watson, meaning that we still have 8 potential champions as we venture into the northern expanse of Hoenn. Small note, each of my deities has a Meryl minion for the use of HMs like Rock Smash, Strength, and Surf. Now, before we head to Lava Ridge Town to take on the 4th gym leader, I have to first deal with Team Magma admin Maxi on top of Mount Chimney. And though his team doesn't seem like it'd be too difficult to deal with, there's actually a few issues, almost all of which have to do with his lead Mightyena. See, this thing is a massive pain in the ass because he knows Intimidate to drop our attack, is immune to our Psychic type moves, and knows Sand Attack to drop up our accuracy, which in a solo run I can't shake off by switching out. The result is that Mightyena is a uniquely annoying threat, mostly for a handful of my psychic types. Kyogre and Rayquaza can one-shot Maxie's lead before he has a chance to cause any issues, but all 6 of my other legendaries and mythicals are nailed by a sand attack that makes the rest of the fight significantly riskier, though a few can get around it by using Shockwave or Swift, and a handful of the others are too bulky to care about missing a few moves en route to an easy win. But then there's Jimrachi. Poor, sweet little Jimrachi. Shockwaves ensure that he can still hit Mightyena, though Maxie makes a swift switch to Camerupt. Our first Psychic, which he learns at the ridiculously low level of 20, connects into Camerupt and triggers a Serene Grace special defense drop as the stocky horse goes for a Focus Energy. And then our second Psychic misses, granting Camerupt the opportunity to rip a magnitude 8 that crits for a devastating KO. This is by far the most brutal death up until this point, because with just a little bit better luck, Jimrachi's run could have kept going for who knows how long. There's an argument to be made that it's worth resetting the run and giving Jimrachi another chance, but that's not how life works. Jimrachi simply wasn't Himrachi, and though the end of his run was Grimrachi, we have to accept that this was the way it was meant to be Rachi. As it comes time to face off against Flannery, just 7 Pokemon now remain. Go ahead and take a guess as to who has the easiest time against her team of 4 fire types. Did you guess Kyogre? Congratulations, you've just been automatically accepted to ASU. Go Sun Devils. Rayquaza and Lonatias both have a pretty easy time with this gym as well, since they resist fire type damage and can clap back with strong special dragon type damage that's enough to make quick work of the normally problematic Torkoal. Okay, I mean, Torkoal is actually still pretty obnoxious against Lonatias since she manages to paralyze her with a body slam, but everything works out just fine thanks to Wish Healing. Groudonald can obviously hit the fire types for super effective damage, though the permanent sun does mean that Torkoal's neutral overheats are going to hurt real bad. So borrowing a strategy from some of the fights against Watson, we use Bulk Up against the significantly less threatening Numel to ensure that Mudshot gets the clean KO. Very lucky we didn't see a 5% miss. Bulk Up is also the plan for Mewin and Mewtrudy. As we continue on in this challenge, you'll notice that winning these fights will almost always require either setting up a sweep, using recovery to stay healthy, or both. Now, even at max attack, neither Mewin nor Mewtrudy are strong enough to one-shot Torkoal, so this isn't a guaranteed victory. The fiery Terrapin rips an overheat that we thankfully survive. One more dig guarantees the KO and sends Mewin through to the next split. But Mewtrudy, she has a bit of trouble as Flannery brings in Camerupt. While we were bulking up, Numel managed to go for a sunny day. So even though Mewtrudy's return one-shots our current foe, if Torkoal comes in with the sun still up, her overheat will kill with a high roll. I could stall out the last turn of sun by intentionally not killing Camerupt, but if she chooses to rip an overheat herself, then Torkoal's unboosted overheat would get the KO anyways. So it's a do or die situation, and if I make the wrong choice, Mewtrudy is done for. After some deliberation, I decide to stay in and hit a confusion. Camerupt falls into the yellow, and then goes for a pitiful tackle. I don't know why, but for some reason Flannery loves going for tackle with Camerupt. It's really weird, but with that, another confusion gets the KO, Torkoal comes out, our return brings her into the yellow, and then she foolishly chooses to set up another sunny day. So one last return gets the KO and wins us the battle. 6 Pokemon through, and all that remains is Celebilly, the grass type. Without a way to boost his special attack, the only chance Billy has here is to use the dirtiest trick in the book, Double Team. That, combined with a decent amount of natural bulk that should actually ensure that he survives at least one overheat, is really all I can hope for. Numel is my setup target, and despite using a scary sunny day, everything works out perfectly as I get to +6 evasion before taking the KO with a confusion at full HP. Camerupt comes in second, and as we continue to rip confusion, she too fails to land a single attack. We even burn through Flannery's first Hyper Potion. And against Slugma, after using a confusion, I intentionally use use Leech Seed to trigger her second Hyper Potion. The less turns against Torkoal, the better. She comes in, Celebility is at full HP, and all I can do is set up Leech Seed and start ripping Confusions. But after just a single hit, Torkoal connects with an Overheat, which high rolls for a clean KO. Once again, a Mythical falls to brutal RNG. Though that is what I get for trying to use Double Team. With Celebility's death, I'm now down to just 6 remaining legendaries. And Mythicals! And we're only at the halfway point of the game. The good news is that the next gym leader is relatively trivial. Now that Kyogre has learned Calm Mind by level up, I have 5 Pokemon with setup moves, and all of them are faster than all 4 of Norman's Pokemon. The idea is to set up against Spinda until he uses Teeter Dance, which gets healed by a held Person Berry, and then start sweeping, taking care to go for a few more setups when it's safe against Vigoroth and or Linoone. Once Slacking comes out, it becomes the dealer's choice. Groudonald and Mewin use Dig to play around the loafing turns, Rayquaza uses Dragon Claw to play around counter, and then a return to finish him off on the following turn. Kyogre brute forces it with Water Pulses, and Mewtrudy, well, once again, Mewtrudy finds herself in a bit of a predicament. See, like with Rayquaza, I start by using a Confusion to avoid a nasty counter, but Slacking instead elects to use a Yawn, which isn't a big deal since our return now kills on the following turn, right? Well, if it was against Rayquaza, yes. The problem is that because Mewtrudy is a Psychic type, Slacking, who knows a super effective Dark type move, actually comes out before Norman's Linoone, which means that as Trudy is forced to take her first turn of sleep, Norman's little weasel is free to get off a nasty belly drum, maxing out his attack stat. Mewtrudy needs to wake up pronto. And she doesn't, though thanks to our bulk ups, Linoone Slash, even at +6, does not get the KO. So we've got another chance, and this time our girlie wakes up to narrowly win the battle. So that leaves the only one of my Pokemon who doesn't have setup. Or at least not in the traditional sense. As I mentioned, she does have Safeguard, which she can use to stop Spinda from using Teeter Dance. Or I mean, evidently she can't stop him from using it since that's what he does on the following turn, but it no longer does anything, so thanks for the easy damageless kill, Daddy-O. This brings in Vigoroth, and even though Dragon Breath would do more damage, I kinda gotta go for Return since the 30% chance of a paralysis from Dragon Breath would double the power of my enemy's Fachades. 2 returns ensures that Vigoroth survives and wastes one of Norman's Hyper Potions, and then with Wish Healing, we can safely take the KO, bait in Slacking, and then get back to full HP. Because this guy threatens Retaliation with Counter, Sleep with Yawn, and big damage with Fachade, I have to be very careful to make sure I always have both Safeguard and a Wish set up, while also only dealing damage every other turn. Frankly, it's pretty nerve-wracking, and a critical hit Fachade brings Laniatius 11 HP away from wiping. But in the end, the Hulking Beast falls with Laniatius at 61 HP. That leaves Linoone, and with a Silk Scarf for the 10% boost, our returns are just enough for the 2-shot, winning us the battle against Norman for the 6th and final time, resulting in the very first Deathless Gym of the entire challenge. With access to Surf, we're off to Eastern Hoenn, and this next split is probably the easiest so far, since we can also get access to the TMs for Ice Beam and Thunderbolt, both of which everyone except Groudonald can learn, and even he can learn Thunderbolt. So the combination of these 2 TMs makes the fights against Winona, the Flying-type gym leader, almost completely trivial. Ice Beams for Swablu, Tropius, and Altaria, Thunderbolts, or in some cases Shockwaves, for Pelipper and Skarmory. The main thing to consider is that if I drop a move that I learned from a TM, it's gone forever, so I do need to be a little careful so that I don't lose something I'll need in the late game. Regardless, the only outlier to the Bolt Beam strategy is Groudonald. Instead, his weapon of choice is a simple rock, which I learned the hard way is quite effective against birds. A single AP kills Swablu and brings in Tropius. And this guy is actually pretty scary since the dino knows Solar Beam, which thanks to our drought is now a 1-turn move. Fortunately, even with the chlorophyll boost, Groudonald is just barely faster, meaning that we can now set up a Sandstorm that will now force Solar Beam to be a 2-turn move, or Tropius will just go for an Aerial Ace. Cool, yeah, that definitely didn't take forever to plan around, so whatever. For the record, Sandstorm also halves the damage of Solar Beam, which is why that would have been so awesome. Anyways, with Tropius dead, Pelipper comes in third and falls to a quad-effective Thunderbolt. Groudon still has a 90 base special attack stat, so his special moves are nothing to laugh at. And it's for that same reason that an Overheat tears through Skarmory. So last is Altaria, but Groudonald is simply far too bulky to be threatened by anything the giant dancing turkey can do. 2 Ancient Powers get the KO and win us the second Deathless Gym Badge in a row. Next stop, Moss Deep City, though there's a not so insignificant amount of Team Aqua and Magma crap along the way. The biggest checkpoint here is a rematch against Maxie, who once again leads with a Mighty Anna, though since he no longer knows Sand Attack, the only danger is confusions, which can usually be avoided with a held Person Berry. Everyone clears through this fight, some with more wiggle room than others, but the end result is the same. The Moss Deep City Gym is a tricky one, since Tate and Liza are a double battle. In fact, they simply won't fight you if you only have one Pokemon in your party. Fortunately, I have 2, and it's time for Meryl to make the ultimate sacrifice in service of his or her one true lord. In every single matchup, this makes Xatu go for a Psychic and Claydol go for an Earthquake, both with the intent of killing poor Meryl. So in some instances, this actually results in a free turn, but after that, in every instance, it becomes a very scary 2v1. Tate and Liza have 4 Pokemon, and with very few ways to guarantee KOs on their bulky Mons, and even fewer ways to get a double KO on any given turn, my Pokemon are almost guaranteed to be taking more than a few hits. By the way, for anyone still upset about Jimrachi's early demise, I'm pretty sure this would have been the definitive end of the road for him. Let's start with the easiest matchup. Kyle Ogre. Save for that short fake out against Watson's Manectric, this lucky bastard hasn't struggled a day in his life, and that remains true here thanks to rain-boosted Surfs that do massive damage to all of Tate and Liza's Pokemon. Now, it doesn't actually one-shot Claydol or Xatu, but that's fine because it perpetually forces Tate and Liza to spam Hyper Potions as we take out Claydol's partner Pokemon one by one. Lunatone actually also survives, but it's fine because Kyle Ogre is bulky enough to shrug off a Psychic and win the battle just a few turns later. Easy like a bake oven. But for everyone else, this fight is a real struggle. Let's go to Mewtrudy, who's got to rely on her classic bulk up strat. This setup also serves to reduce the damage from Claydol's Earthquakes, which they love to spam. I think the AI prioritizes using Earthquake when their partner Pokemon is immune. After 2 bulk ups, Mewtrudy's Shadow Balls are enough to KO all of our opponents, so while enduring mercifully critless Earthquakes, they all fall until victory is ours. Mewin uses an identical strategy, albeit with less natural attack, in exchange for better bulk. Even so, the result is the same. 2 bulk ups and sweep. I'm getting really lucky here that Xatu seems to always prefer to set up a Calm Mind instead of use Confuse Ray, though Mewin at least is actually holding a Person Berry for that exact reason. Anyways, this is all fine and dandy for the bulk up users that can learn the super effective Shadow Ball, but Groudonald and Rayquaza can't. So we're gonna need different strategies. Groudonald can learn Solar Beam, which hits 3 of Tate and Liza's 4 Pokemon for super effective damage, though unfortunately it doesn't get the OHKO on any of them, and that's a huge problem because Solrock also knows Solar Beam for super effective damage against us. I really need to be able to get one-shots, otherwise I'm simply taking too much damage turn after turn. If only there was a way to boost our special attack. And fortunately, there is. See, tucked away in Lava Ridge Town is a small boy who will teach my Pokemon Mimic, a niche move that lets you learn an opponent's move for the remainder of the battle. So against Tate and Liza, Groudonald first uses Bulk Up as his plucky disciple takes an attack from Xatu. Claydol's follow-up Earthquake does basically nothing thanks to our natural bulk and the defense boost. And then I rip a Strength into Xatu. Critically not enough to get the KO, so that he survives to use Calm Mind. This means that on the next turn, as Tate and Liza heal, I can use Mimic to learn Calm Mind, all the while grunting Earthquakes like a champ. So then it's time to use our newly learned move to ensure one-shots on Solrock and Lunatone with our one-turn Solar Beams. Xatu simply goes for a second Calm Mind, and once again I'm lucky that he's not clicking Confuse Ray. As we take the KO with a few strengths, using a held Shell Bell for moderately consistent recovery, Xatu continues to spam Calm Mind, effectively sealing the fate of his fellow teammates. Once the bird goes down, Solrock takes the stage, and a now +1 Solar Beam snags the instant KO. The chip from Cleodol's Earthquakes is starting to build up, but without a crit, there's nothing that can be done. Lunatone falls to another OHKO, and then the EQ spamming terror follows soon after. Groudonald is through probably his hardest challenge to date. Now, Rayquaza could use a similar strategy, but the issue is that though he can learn Solar Beam, it can never actually be a one-turn move thanks to our signature ability Airlock negating the effects of weather. He also simply doesn't have the bulk needed to fully set up, especially because Claydol won't be going for Earthquakes on account of our secondary flying type. Instead, they'd be using Psychic or Ancient Power, which will just do too much damage. So I decide that my best bet is to borrow from Kyle Ogre's playbook and start spamming Surf. Without Stab or the Rain boost, we're doing way less damage, though it's not nothing. Unfortunately, things become dire as after our second Surf, Xatu sets up the Sun, though again, thanks to Airlock that doesn't actually do anything, and more critically, Claydol uses Light Screen. As a Hyper Potion heals the Giant Dreidel, I use an Ancient Power to take the KO on Xatu, but I can already tell that I've made a fatal mistake. Crunch on turn 2 to snipe Claydol before they could set up Light Screen was the right call. And though I can spam Surfs for minor damage, Rayquaza isn't strong enough to endure the onslaught that comes from a 2v1. A lucky critical hit on Claydol gives me hope, and so too does back-to-back misses from Lunatone's Hypnosis. But with both of Tate and Liza's aces out on the field, Rayquaza soon becomes overwhelmed by their psychic forces. Even a Resto Chesto tech isn't enough to save us. And though we come painfully close, just one hit away, Rayquaza falls and his hopes of becoming a Hoenn champion are over. With that brutal defeat, Launatius is the last of my Pokemon to take on the 7th gym leader, and though she has significantly less special attack than Rayquaza, her bulk as well as reliable recovery means that she has a better chance at making it through. It also means that only Claydol can hit her for even neutral damage. I mean, that's the real kicker if I'm being honest, and with Shadow Ball to do solid damage even after our foe sets up a Calm Mind, Launatius has got this one in the bag. Our streak of deathless gym fights may be over, but 5 legendaries and mythicals remain as we approach the final challenges of the game. The multi-battle with Steven against Maxie and the fight against Archie on Seafloor Cavern are both a little spooky thanks to potential confusions from their respective Mightyanas and Crobats, but with the proper prep and a little bit of luck, we all make it through just fine. The fight against the final gym leader Juan has the potential to be scary because his ace Kingdra with double team is notoriously difficult to take out. But now that Tate and Liza have given me the TM for Calm Mind, all 5 of my remaining Pokemon have access to setup, which they can all effortlessly use against Juan's weaker teammates, such that by the time they get to Kingdra, a single hit is enough to take him out, no questions asked. This strategy, you can't see me, but I'm using air quotes around strategy, is more or less going to be how we handle every member of the Elite Four and the champion Wallace. Without setup, we're simply taking too much damage from each individual Pokemon. Though even with setup, things aren't as easy as they appear for several of my potential champs. Here they are, all leveled up to the level cap of 55 to match Drake's Salamence, though they will be able to earn XP in the Elite Four until they hit level 58 to match Wallace's Milotic. But with that, let's see which of these 5 legendaries and mythicals can make it to the Hall of Fame. Starting first with Kyle Ogre. At this point, you may have guessed that Kyle Ogre has the easiest time with at least the Elite Four. Rain-boosted Surf, sated by Ice Beams and Thunderbolts to hit those that resist our stab move, are more than enough to plow through the likes of Sydney, Phoebe, Glacia, and Drake without much of a passing thought. So soon enough, Kyle Ogre and I are face-to-face with Wallace and his team of 6 bulky water types. The main problem will be his double-teaming Swift Swim Ludicolo, who, thanks to our Drizzle, will be be faster and could also threaten with Giga Drain or Leech Seed. But first is Wailord, and against him, I take the opportunity to set up a Calm Mind as he rips a Double Edge for solid damage. Then, taking advantage of our permanent rain, Kyogre rips a perfectly accurate Thunder for the clean KO. Of course, that immediately brings in Ludicolo, so here's where Kyogre's fate is decided. We're really hoping for anything other than Leech Seed, and thankfully Wallace greedily goes for a double team that is completely ineffective against our Thunder. On turn 2, a Giga Drain is a little scary, but after the Calm Mind it doesn't do much, so a third Thunder snags the second KO. Tentacruel, though quite bulky, still falls to a +1 Thunder, but that brings in Milotic. He's strong enough to survive one hit, so again the hope is anything other than a Toxic, and Wallace throws by ripping a rain-boosted Surf. After some full restores, Milotic falls and Whiscash comes in 5th, but at this point, victory is ours. A rain-boosted Surf is enough to get the KO on him, and with Gyarados as Wallace's final Pokemon, one last Thunder means that Kyogre has defeated the Pokemon League and become the first legendary to successfully solo a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Emerald. Will he stand alone as the sole champion, or will his legendary and mythical brethren rise to the occasion? Next up, Groudonald, and though his type matchup isn't quite as favorable as Kyogre's, there's something to be said about the raw power of Stab Earthquakes coming off of that 150 base attack stat. Even after an Intimidate, it's enough to one-shot Sydney's Mightyena so that we don't have to deal with Sand Attack, and given that fun little statistic, you can just imagine how easy it is for him to sweep through the rest of Sydney's Pokemon, as well as both Phoebe and Glacia's. Drake is a little trickier since 3 of his Pokemon are immune to Earthquake, but a lead Shelgon that loves to click Protect provides the perfect opportunity to get off not just 1 bulk up, but 2, since we can avoid the speed drop from the subsequent Rock Tomb thanks to our held White Herb. With those boosts, we can now ensure one-shots on Shelgon and Kingdra with Earthquake, as well as on Altaria with an Ancient Power. Flygon is probably the trickiest since we have to rely on Aerial Ace, which is only a 2-shot, and frankly, a burn from Flamethrower would be pretty bad. But since the poor guy has no such luck, he goes down, leaving just Salamence. Thanks to an Intimidate, we're now at just +1 attack, so our Ancient Power isn't quite enough for the Oko, meaning that Salamence has one last chance to shake things up with another Flamethrower. But Groudon clutches up, and after some healing, he takes the final KO of the Elite Four, meaning that it's time for another matchup against Wallace, and this one is gonna take some luck. Critically, Wailord is gonna have to play ball, since on turn 1, I need to go for a bulk up, exposing Groudonald to a potentially nasty Water Spout or Blizzard. But fortunately, as suspected, the stupid fish uses a Rain Dance. This means that on the following turn, I can use Sunny Day, thereby having the damage of an otherwise absolutely devastating Water Spout. Even in the sun, though, a critical hit would have been the end of the run right there. Crazy. But now, at +1, an Earthquake gets the clean Oko to start our sweep. Tentacruel falls, and so too does Whiscash. Milotic comes in 4th, and once again, he's bulky enough to survive a single hit. Nope, just kidding. Groudon is a god. Ludicolo is again a potential problem since he resists Earthquakes, but he doesn't resist Aerial Ace, and at +1, that's just barely enough for the clean KO. Side note, this is without EV trading. What a ridiculous Pokemon. But we're not quite out of the woods yet, because last is Gyarados, who gets off an Intimidate that brings Groudonald back to neutral attack. I decide to start with a Sunny Day to avoid massive damage from Gyarados' Surfs, though this does let him set up a Dragon Dance. With the speed advantage, he now goes for a second Dragon Dance, as our Aerial Ace does significantly less than 50%. This is, getting scary. Dragon Dance number 3 comes out as Aerial Ace number 2 brings Gyarados into the yellow. And then, the moment of truth. Gyarados rips a massive Hyper Beam that Groudonald lives with 12 HP. One last Aerial Ace takes out Wallace's final Pokemon, winning us not just the battle, but the entire run. By extremely narrow margins, Groudonald joins his aquatic rival in the Hall of Fame. So who's next? Mewtrudy has the highest base special attack stat of all our legendaries. And Mythicals! Dusclops at a whopping 154, and that ends up being a lifesaver because the biggest threat to her entire Elite Four run is the very first Pokemon, Sydney's Mightyena. Were it not for the busted special attack stat and a held never melt ice, we wouldn't be able to get the KO and we'd be risking bad RNG from a potential sand attack. But since we do get that KO, Mewtrudy is free to KO the rest of Sydney's Pokemon without a worry in the world. Phoebe requires a single Calm Mind to enact a Psychic Sweep, though thankfully her lead Dusclops almost always goes for Protect on turn 1, providing the perfect opportunity to do so. Same too goes for Glacia's lead Celio, who almost always sets up Hail. And we've already seen how easy it is to set up against Drake's Shelgon, so yeah, simple sweeps once again carry our soon-to-be champion to the final fight against Wallace. And again, the plan is no different. Calm Mind on turn 1 as Wailord sets up a Rain Dance. And then, powerful electric types slice through Wailord and Tentacruel like a pair of perfectly cooked fish fillets. Ludicolo again opts for a greedy double team, which we thwart with a Thunder. Turn 2 sees Mewtrudy taking a rain-boosted Surf before ripping a second Thunder for the third KO of the fight. Whiscash is fourth and actually survives a Psychic, which allows him to get off in Amnesia. So on the heel, I set up another Calm Mind, which means that we do over 50% on the following turn, as Whiscash goes for Amnesia number 2. So fine, I'll go for Calm Mind number 3 at the expense of a tiny hit from Hyper Beam. No big deal. And a recharge turn means that Mewtrudy can get to +4 special attack, thereby absolutely ensuring the KO with a Psychic and perfectly setting her up for easy kills against both Gyarados and Milotic. Just like that, Mewtrudy has made it to the Hall of Fame as victor number 3. Mewin is our penultimate potential champ and the last living mythical. His strategy will be largely identical to Mewtrudy's, though things simply aren't as easy without that 154 base special attack. For one, we cannot get the Oko on Sydney's Mightyena, meaning that I have to set up a Calm Mind that allows our foe to rip that dangerous sand attack. So from here, every single one of our attacks has only a 75% chance to hit. So naturally, we immediately miss an Ice Beam. Fortunately, Mightyena opts for a Crunch instead of a second sand attack, and our second Ice Beam does indeed connect. Shiftry comes out next, and thankfully immediately falls to another Ice Beam, since he has both Swagger and Double Team that could have caused some serious problems. Cacturne also falls to a single Ice Beam, so as Crawdaunt comes in fourth, I set up a second Calm Mind to ensure the one-shot on Absol. We eat a Strength as a result, and then with luck on our side, Thunderbolt connects for the Oko. So one last hit against Sydney's ace is all we need, and we get it! Mewin takes the KO, and victory is ours. But that brings us to the fight against Phoebe, and once again, her lead Dusclops will almost always use Protect to ensure we can set up a Calm Mind for free. Unfortunately, with just 100 base special attack, Mewin can't get the KO with a single Psychic after just one Calm Mind. And also just as a note, if I went for Bulk Up and Shadow Ball, we'd have the same issue. Because either way, Mewin needs a second turn of setup to guarantee KOs, and that marks him for dead, because it allows Dusclops to use Curse, which means that Mewin will now be taking 25% of his HP at the end of every turn. There's simply nothing I can do. I just don't have enough turns to finish off all of Phoebe's Pokemon. And even if I had a Citrus Berry to survive an extra turn or a Resto Chesto Tech, it wouldn't matter because Phoebe's second Dusclops is bulky enough to survive a +2 Psychic. Mewin came so close, but in the end, it just wasn't quite enough. RIP, buddy. RIP. Latias is my last chance to have a champion that isn't a box legend. I mean, I guess Mewtwo technically isn't a box legend, but you know what I mean. Like with Mewin, we need to play Sand Attack Roulette against Sydney's Mightyena, since he just barely survives a Dragon Claw low roll. The good news is that Latias now knows Recover, so even with some misses, she's able to make it through this fight in one piece. And Recover also means that it's a fair bit safer to set up 2 Calm Minds against Phoebe's lead Dusclops, though this time she chooses to go for the double Protect, which means Latias does not get cursed, effectively winning us the match on the spot. Psychic one-shots Phoebe's first 4 Pokemon, including just barely the bulky level 51 Dusclops, and then a Dragon Claw takes out Sableye, so that's an easy dub. Calm Mind sweeps are also enough to take out Glacia and Drake, so I soon find myself facing off against Wallace for the fourth and final time. As usual, I kick things off with a Calm Mind against Wailord, who goes for his, at this point, predictable Rain Dance, and then a Thunderbolt gets the KO. From here, though, things get a little different because as Tentacruel comes out second, he actually survives a +1 Psychic, which lets him rip a Sludge Bomb that causes a poison. Not a huge deal now because we have a Pecha Berry, and with Wallace burning a full restore, it lets us get off a second Calm Mind that ensures we get the clean Oko with our second Psychic. But now Milotic comes in third, and if she goes for a Toxic, Laniatius is suddenly on a very deadly timer. But he just uses Ice Beam, so crisis averted. A Thunderbolt kills Milotic, and against Gyarados, I decide to use Recover to get back to full HP as he sets up a Dragon Dance. This proves to be the right call, as Wallace, reigning Hoenn champ by the way, uses Earthquake. Why? I have no idea. But that means that Laniatius is at full freaking HP as Gyarados falls, and Ludicolo comes in 5th. Double team means that this could still be very scary. Thunderbolt brings the Dancing Duck into the yellow, and then he goes for a Leech Seed that misses. That was lucky and would have made this endgame a lot scarier if it hit. Our Psychic kills Ludicolo, so last for Wallace is Whiscash. We hit hard, but ever so slightly not hard enough, allowing the fish to try and forget the sins of his past. And we've seen this film before. Full Restore into Calm Mind, Psychic into Amnesia, Calm Mind into Hyper Beam, Calm Mind into Recharge, and then one last Psychic to win us not just the final battle against Wallace, but the final playthrough of the entire challenge. 4 of just 21 legendaries and mythicals made it to the Hall of Fame. Were they the ones you thought? Did I miss any potential RNG-proof strategies? And what do you think about this type of video? I had a lot of fun doing this, and I'm already brainstorming how it would work in different games, so let me know what you'd like to see next. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Or don't, I don't know, but stay tuned for more Nuzlocke content, and until then, remember to always, always, always play around the critical hit.